Welcome back to the John Fredericks Radio Show. This is Mike Rubino, guest hosting for your Godzilla of the Truth, John Fredericks. Now we have former Virginia Senator Roz Dance. Roz is the co-chair of the Virginia Consumer Healthcare Alliance, an occasional guest here on the show. And she's here to discuss things like the effort to protect patients from surprise medical bills. Today, however, our topic is about protecting taxpayer dollars and making sure they are spent properly. Roz, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Mike, and thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I want to dive right in here and explain, why you're here today, which is to shed light on what's happening with federal stimulus funds that Washington has sent Virginia to provide relief in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So far, Virginia has received more than $6 billion in funding. Let me say that again, $6 billion with a B. And those funds have been allocated through several pieces of legislation, each with specific purposes. One piece of legislation is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Security Act, also known as the CARES Act. And the CARES Act has provided more than $3 billion to the Commonwealth of Virginia, and a significant portion of those funds are intended to support frontline healthcare providers involved in directly responding to this pandemic. At this point, the Northam administration has released less than a third of these funds. Roz, what is the role of the Virginia Consumer Healthcare Alliance on this issue, and what can we do to make and hold the Northam administration accountable?
Well, Mike, as you said, the United States Congress this spring approved several pieces of coronavirus-related economic stimulus bills worth trillions of dollars, and these bills are intended to do a wide variety of things, including enhanced unemployment support for people who lost jobs and work due to the shutdown, to help local and state governments, and to support our education system, as well as to deliver much-needed relief to hard-hit industries like healthcare. And like you mentioned, Virginia has received more than $6 billion in stimulus funds to help states support those frontline providers, essential industries, and localities. Of that $6 billion that Virginia has received, more than $3 billion came for the CARES Act, which is very specific about how the relief funds are to be spent and dispersed. Also, Mike, among the specific provisions in the legislation is support for community health centers, mental health and substance abuse services, nursing homes, those rural hospitals, services for the elderly, and much more. The reason we, the Virginia Consumer Healthcare Alliance, has engaged on this issue is that we see this as consistent with our mission of raising public awareness about important healthcare policy issues so that Virginians can directly engage with government officials to make their voices heard. This is what we've been as our mission, and that's what we're trying to do here. Issues here, though, is a taxpayer issue and a healthcare issue. Washington has sent Richmond billions of dollars to support our healthcare providers. And so far, much of that money hasn't been allocated as specified under the law. And so we're making sure people know that so they can get engaged. They can help follow the money and use their voices to encourage elected officials in Richmond to spend a portion of those funds to help frontline healthcare providers.
What I love about this cause, Roz, is that it's nonpartisan. All Virginians, people across the Commonwealth, can rally around the idea that, all citizens should be able to be a citizen watchdog and hold government accountable. And it sounds here like the issue is how Virginia spends this $3 billion in federal stimulus funds that is provided by taxpayer money. And we have to keep a watchful eye on that process to ensure that the money is spent in accordance with the intent of Congress. So you mentioned that the funds have been sent to Richmond. Who will be making these funding decisions? So who can we hold accountable specifically?
Well, Mike, the relief funds have been sent to Governor Northam and his administration, so they are the ones who will be making the allocation decisions from what we can tell so far. It's possible, though, that the General Assembly, which is expected to be back in Richmond this summer for a special session, as they do, this one is to deal with budgetary items and, of course, other matters related to COVID-19 pandemic and the effects all this will have on the state's fiscal situation. They're going to be weighing in on this, and I'm sure that $6 billion will be there up for discussion, advice, or whatever. to the governor and his team. But to this point, the Northern administration has been in the driver's seat with regards to making decisions about doling out these federal relief funds. And I tell you, as of right now, less than one-third of the CARES Act funds have been allocated. And the healthcare providers of Virginia who spent so much and invested significantly in preparing for the response to this pandemic, they're still waiting for relief. The caregivers and the people who put themselves in harm's way on the front lines, they would be helped by this relief, but right now is being held onto by the folks in Richmond. I can tell you, Mike, and I know you realize that I spent almost 15 years in the General Assembly, and most of that time was spent serving on the Appropriations Committee in the House and Finance Committee in the Senate. And we are known as fiscally conservative and very frugal when it comes to the state's money. We're always trying to make sure that we're prioritizing correctly. So sometimes we're kind of slow. And our message has to be that those funds should be released to support our healthcare heroes expeditiously. People can't wait.
Well, I know that, Virginians really respect and admire the frugality that you've shown with their money, and I think that they expect that the General Assembly and the governor would, reciprocate and continue on in that vein of being frugal with funds given to them. So in that light, how can we, the audience, myself, how can we help? What can people do? How can we engage? What is there out there to help in these very unsure, uncertain times?
Well, you're right. We live in interesting and transformative times, Mike, and as we watch our televisions, I won't even get into that, how moving and emotional I guess we're all feeling at these times. But current events are reminding us of the power of people, the power that they have when they lift up their voices and insist that government leaders take action. And what we're asking Virginians to do is to contact our Governor Northam and his administration. Remind them that the CARES Act specifies a type of expenses and providers who are eligible for relief or funding in health care. It applies to expenses incurred by healthcare providers to offset COVID-19 expenses for caring for patients, administering the tests, acquiring personal protective equipment, known as PPE, for example. Taking on this cause is consistent with the mission of the Virginia Consumer Healthcare Alliance. We are a bipartisan, good government, taxpayer watchdog issues-oriented orientation that is focused on improving the healthcare delivery system in Virginia for patients and consumers. We have used our voices to increase healthcare access in Virginia, to stop surprise medical bills. I know that this year the General Assembly approved unanimously, which is that's history in itself, both the House and the Senate confirming the need to change that surprise medical billing for Virginians. But our voices now need to be heard to ensure taxpayer dollars are spent wisely and appropriately by Virginia officials as relates to how we address the CARES Act and the distribution of that $6 billion, in particular the $3 billion that was allocated for the CARES Act. So we're asking concerned Virginians to join us in contacting Governor Northam and tell our governor, yes, we appreciate his rating that he has now as far as how he's handled the health care, direct care issues to the citizens of Virginia, and they've given them a wonderful rating on that. But just as important is how we take care of those people who have helped us to get these favorable numbers as far as how we are dealing with them. His team needs to provide federal relief aid to the nursing homes, hospitals, and health centers on the COVID-19 front lines. And people can call the governor's office at 804-786-2211 and ask them to provide CARES Act relief funds to Virginia healthcare providers now. That number again is 804-786-2211. This, too, is important. You appreciate what it's done, what the team has done so far with COVID-19 as far as dealing with how we address the needs of Virginians, keeping them safe and healthy as possible during this terrible time. But we also have to be concerned about those that's on the front lines. Are we reimbursing them at the speed we need to ensure that this continues? Because this is just the beginning. I don't see this as a clear ending, and no one knows until we get a vaccine. But we can do this. 786-2211 by having your voices heard, because this governor will respond. I am saying he will respond to the people, and they need to hear from him.
Well, thank you for the update, Roz. Once again, I'm just going to repeat that number that she said to contact the governor. That's 804-786-2211. This is Mike Rubino filling in for your Godzilla of the Truth, John Fredericks. John is hopefully taking a much-needed rest. He'll be back tomorrow. We are here with State Senator Roz Dance, and I wanted to talk about the 2-year anniversary of the Medicaid expansion budget signing, which happened on June 7th, 2018. So, Roz, tell us what happened. Walk us through that fight and what the consequences have been, the amazing consequences for the people of Virginia.
That's a good question, Mike, and I am really pleased that that happened and that I was actually still an active member on the Senate Finance Committee that had to vote that bill out of committee onto the floor for what ended up being a really long, long day before its final passage. And it was truly the work of bipartisan work of both sides of the aisle working together to make it happen. When we pass legislation, it's never a point of it's perfect, that it's done just right. But over 5 years, we had attempted to get it right, and every time it was a failure. But when we look at where we are now with COVID-19, and we're concerned about health care, that thanks to that bill being passed, at least 400,000 people could feel a little bit better about I can get services and I qualify to get the care I need, and I can pay for those services that I need if the time arrives. Whether or not hopefully they're not involved, but that was what it represented, an opportunity for those who fell through the gap, that didn't make enough or made just too much to be able to get the health care they needed, could now apply and receive that care. And on that night, on that day that became a late, late night, we saw the best of Virginians, that even those who had originally adamantly said no turned a page because they listened to, I'll always remember, and I have to call him out, that is Senator Emmett Hanger, because he was like a Lincoln for me on that day, because he spoke. He addressed every issue that was brought, and he did it gentlemanly. He didn't lose control. There was support being provided to him for the questions he had to respond from my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who came together to make sure that he could answer. It didn't take one person. It took all of us working together, but it would not have passed if it had not been, you can tell I'm getting emotional, but if it had not been a bipartisan supported bill, it would not have become law. And on that day, I saw the very best of Virginia, where we might have disagreed and everything might not have been as we would have liked it to be. Nothing is perfect, but everybody had a chance to speak, and we listened. And at the end of the day, I think we were even stunned, because even though we would have wanted it to happen, we knew that there is so much that can stop things from happening. Just one word change and a refusal to move from that point or whatever. All of those issues arose that day. But we were able to overcome all of those, and as a result, 400,000 more people could be added as those that qualified for health care.
Well, you speak to something really amazing, and I think you also speak to an amazing person, that's Senator Emmett Hanger. I have the just utmost respect for him. He's a gentleman. He's a scholar. He's a lion of the Senate, and people should, not take him for granted, because you rarely have someone who stands up for Virginians and, puts Virginians first like Senator Hanger does. Roz, I want to pivot to one last thing here in the waning 3 minutes we have in this segment. I want to talk about balanced billing. So this last legislative session, you as a co-chair of the Virginia Consumer Healthcare Alliance had another great victory. Why don't you walk us through that and exactly what has happened since that has passed?
Well, that was a hard fought, hard fought. I said it as far as a legislator. I was one of those that supported legislation for balanced billing with the understanding that it had to be. I believe in compromise and win-win situations. That it had to be something that's good for the people, and it also had to be making sure that the industry realized the importance and they could live with and buy into, because you don't want to just say something, tie somebody's hands, and then they don't really activate it or the policy as it was intended. But it ended up being a compromise between both sides, where no side was really saying, I got everything I wanted, but it worked out. And it worked out because, again, I really believe that the Consumer Healthcare Alliance really was able to reach people, and in a very bipartisan way, non-judgmental, but just giving the information and letting the citizens of Virginia speak out. We did this through our teleconference. We did this through direct conversations with people in general, and they responded and they spoke out, and the members of the General Assembly, both the House and the Senate. And it's very, very hard to get legislation passed where both sides are in agreement. There are certain things that you say we always sort of like seem to be in lockstep for, but then there are other issues where we're divided, and it's always like 5 or 6% of those issues that we just can't reach it. And this seemed to be one of those issues until this year. Things changed. I'd like to think that we had a little bit of a role that my co-chair and I, leading up the Virginia Consumer Healthcare Alliance, had a small role because we knew the participants. We had worked with them. They're our colleagues. We knew that there was good in everybody there. And it's always the information. With knowledge comes a change in attitude, and we all respond to our constituent bases. We might come from different approaches, but we realize that they are truly the bosses. They hire us when they vote us in. They fire us when they don't vote for us. And so they really have the last word, and they're becoming more assertive in accepting that role and speaking out. And that's what made the difference, in that there were different bills coming and going. There were changes, but ultimately, at the end of the day, to see the House unanimously vote to have that bill become law, to see the Senate unanimously vote, even in the times when there are some issues that just could not be reached, for that they came together. And again, we saw the best of Virginia in that bill. Even now, I'm sure that they're all pleased and proud of what they did because of what we're going through right now.
Well, I think you're completely right. We have to go to commercial break, but I want to thank you, Roz, for coming on, and I want to just echo your sentiments. Everyone should go to virginiaconsumerhealthcare.org to join Roz and Chris Peace's group, and also call the governor at 804-786-2211 and hold them accountable for this federal funding that they've received. Make sure it ends up in the healthcare system and in the providers' hands, because they need help.